Hi, I'm Craig von Wiederhold. This is Amos Bloomberg. We both work for an agency called Shepardson, Stern, and Kaminsky. We're about a 20-year-old advertising agency that was born out of politics in Washington. We do a lot of big clients. We're not a big agency, but we do a lot of corporate clients, but we also do about 20 to 30% of our business as philanthropy. So we work with places like the Gates Foundation. We worked on the Obama campaigns. And the project we're going to talk about today is one of those, and they're sort of true to sort of the spirit of the agency and what we like to do. We're also both part of the smaller group within that called SS+K Labs.
You're on there already.
Ah, there we are. And we focus on emerging technologies. We're sort of very small, 5 of us. We have an in-house development team, and we do things like when Vine launched, we had the first web search engine launched 4 days after it launched. We have a charity app that you can create virtual charities with your iPhone. Lots of one-offs like that. For this project, we do lots of UX, obviously. And we always feel like we do UX for people like everyone in this room, which are people like us.
Big corporations.
Yes.
Advertising agencies, yeah.
And we're always sort of looking to our peers, sort of, to do something that's smart and cool. And what we seem to learn over and over again is that we always do something that's too fancy and too sophisticated in the beginning, and we eventually learned that the best thing to do is to keep it as simple as possible, and simplifying things is not that easy. And so we had a long process with this.
Let me also note that most people can't tell the difference between simple and complicated, yet we found with this project, as we'll get to it, that became somewhat important.
So what we built is something called Moving Through Glass. You might recognize that technology from the Smithsonian there, an old Google Glass. We built an application that is used by people with Parkinson's to take exercises that they do in a classroom setting that we'll talk about into the real world. And we were part of the original Google Glass Discover project. And right before we launched was when we discovered actually they were being canceled. Google graciously gave us about 50 pair, which are all now in use at the Mark Morris Dance Center in Brooklyn. And we'll talk about that a little bit more too. So let's first talk about what Parkinson's is. I'm sure everyone knows someone with Parkinson's. It's a disorder of the central nervous system, generally affects older people. The problems that are brought by it are all problems of movement, at least in the initial stages. And the real problems are problems with initiation and attenuation of motion. So people have a hard time getting moving. They get stiff. They also tremble at the same time. So they sort of have too much motion and too little. And there's medication and physical therapy, and a lot of good new meds that are helping people a lot. But a really important component of Parkinson's treatment is human interaction. And a large reason for that is that people with Parkinson's have a hard time starting motion, but they can effectively borrow your motion if they see it. So proxy movement, human proxy movement, is profound to Parkinson's sufferers. And so, let us go on. So, yeah.
Just want to mention also that since this is user experience awards,
we're going to get there soon.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. That the user here is vastly different from what you find in your usual user groups when you're doing mobile or web applications.
Yeah.
So just to bear that in mind, that this is something where we found that the users here are totally different than what we've done any time ever.
Yeah, and our usual standard of we're going to be super smart and make something super cool, they couldn't care less. They want it to work in a special way just for that group. So we partnered with a group called Dance for PD that was founded by the Mark Morris Dance Group, who in 2001, some instructors realized that what dancers do, all those exercises and movement and rhythmic entrainment and all that, really applied to Parkinson's. And they started classes, and it quickly grew. It's in 80 countries now, and the center is still in Brooklyn at the Mark Morris Dance Center, and there are weekly classes. Sounds like you know what this is. It basically takes the techniques of dance, taking the dancers, and they're not patients, they're not Parkinson's sufferers, they are dancers. And they literally go through routines, they prepare for a show, they do about 2 or 3 shows a year. And it's standard dance training, rhythmic entrainment, balance, movement, and choreography. And all the choreography is based on Mark Morris performances.
And the music is also custom music that they have actually
Yeah.
piano player in the room with them as they're doing the dance routines.
Yep, and a lot of it's been composed, and the actual composer is there to play. Been very successful, as we said, all over the country. And here are some of the performers. There's a great documentary you can see called Capturing Grace, which is about the entire program. All right, so on to the UX. I'll let you talk about Glass.
Yeah, so one of the interesting things here is that we were using the Glass platform, which was at the time and still is today because it's of course been canceled by Google. It is and was an unusual portable mobile device that had voice activation. You could speak spoken commands and have it respond to you and show you things that you were requesting. It also had quote unquote hands-free control via the voice commands. But the most of the platform was used through a series of taps and swipes that you could do. So that was most of the motions that you would do to control your interface were tapping and swiping to go forward and backward. And the whole experience is set up like a timeline where you can roll forward or backward through time of the activities you've done over time through that tapping and swiping mechanism. So that's the main intended use, and it's of course fitting into this ubiquitous computing dream that we all have, which is of course not really a reality yet because they've canceled this program. But so that is what we were dealing with as terms of our platform. And
yeah, so the first thing we did was we ideated a lot on about 8 different routines, and we had very grand visions initially of these routines being extremely flexible, of having people able to talk or touch command at any time in the process. We gave you choices of your own music. You could use music from your own application to do free walking. Lots of complicated stuff, including also custom gestures. But what we found when we started, we basically built an early prototype and we started testing it. And we found that there were challenges not only from Glass, but also from our user group. And we'll talk about some of those. I think the first thing is if anyone's ever used Glass, or if you've ever seen someone using Glass, then they're always like this, right? Because that touch target is hard to find. There's no tactile sense for it, and it's imprecise. So we have people whose hands are shaking.
So expecting them to be able to tap and swipe in this intuitive
And more than that,
fashion.
we designed like multi-taps. We did custom gestures, all that stuff, which is ludicrous.
And then so we tried to do the voice control at that point,
Right.
which the hands-free in quotes should be useful to us. But of course, if you have stuttering, stilted speech, as a Parkinson's person may,
Yeah.
you're not going to be able to navigate that way either. So we found ourselves in a bit of a bind where the tap swipe thing's not going to work because they can't even hit the thing, and they can't really speak clearly and in actually the time frame that Google Glass expects them to speak
Right.
in order to control it with the hands-free.
So we have to then adapt the software. We basically, at this point, start building our own software that traps events, gives them more time to speak. We can't do much with the touch target, but then we also learn that what we have to do is start simplifying the app. I don't know if any of you use Glass, but when you put on Google Glass, you've got an extensive menu, everything that's on that app, and you can't control that within Google, really. So we ended up rooting the device and taking all the Google features out so that people put on the Glass, they have one gesture to make, tap and say, okay, Glass, or tap again. They get a list of exercises. At that point, they can say the name of any of these exercises. And the application begins, and then we walk them through proxy routines of dancers basically face-to-face. They even speak to you at the beginning of some of them because, once again, that human interaction is important. And basically from there, we just kept winnowing down controls so that we ultimately ended up that it auto-plays. You make those 2 gestures. You go through the whole thing. You can tap to skip ahead. You can swipe down to go back.
But you
That's
don't have
it.
to do anything.
You don't have to do a thing.
Once you have this thing running, it will actually take you through a series of progressive exercises, starting
Exactly.
from the very earliest ones, which is if somebody's frozen, they can't even move, starting to get them actually moving a bit, and then starting to say, okay, maybe you do some warm-up to kind
Yeah.
of get them moving a little bit more fluidly, and from there we take them to an exercise where it's actually walking down the street or walking in their apartment, for example. So we assume the worst in the sense that we assume a user can't do anything at all. All they have to do is tap this thing once. They're in business. They are now taken through a set of exercises that will get them moving, hopefully, in the course of their day. So
And we're also,
that is where we ended up.
yeah, and we're also dealing with battery life, which is limited. Google said a total of 20 minutes time, right? Our routines are 2, 3, 4 minutes apiece. So you need to dip in and dip out. So we had originally had a listener so that you could talk anytime. We found not only was that difficult, but asynchronous processes used up more battery. So we disabled that. Also, we allow it to rest. We have an application, the most battery intensive one is called Walk With Me. People with Parkinson's, when they're walking in public, will often pick someone, they call it training, and they'll follow you. They'll watch your footsteps. And if you're in a crowded city street, that person turns, you'll pick up someone else in the direction you want to go. That's great if you're in Manhattan. Doesn't work everywhere else if there aren't people on the street. So we wanted this to be available also. However, there's a battery issue. So what we did was, there's another safety issue, which I'll talk about too, was develop it so that you get 15 seconds of a walker with music. That drops out, and all you have is a rhythmic pace to keep you moving. We also realized in testing, fortunately, that it's very distracting to watch a walker in the upper quadrant of your vision, and we had
While
these
you're crossing a street.
right while you're in the city. So we were also dropping out for that reason, to keep things as simple as possible.
We didn't want anybody hit by car.
Yes.
We were testing our prototype.
Our first step.
So we've already talked about this. Yeah, we winnowed down the user experience to really the core, probably one of the simplest UXs, but through one of the more complex processes we've ever gone through to get to the simplest UX that we've probably designed.
Can we show the case study now?
Yeah, let's do it. We'll jump to the video. All right, so just some screenshots so we don't bore you with it.
No. And this is a case study. As I said, there's a documentary also on YouTube about this. Let's see.
Parkinson's is a debilitating movement disorder that affects more than 1 million people in the United States, including 50 to 60,000 new people every year. And to date, there is no known cure. That's why SS+K built Moving Through Glass, the first ever augmented reality application that uses wearable technology to provide round-the-clock aid to people living with Parkinson's. It started with a realization within Mark Morris Dance Group's Dance for PD program. The classes, using the training and techniques of professional dance to enhance the balance, power, and coordination of Parkinson's sufferers, were falling short in a critical way. Participants like me needed tools we could take beyond the classroom and into our daily lives. The agency was asked to find a solution. SS+K started with analyses, from classroom methods to available technologies to specialized user needs. Extending Google's Glass platform, they built custom software to maximize performance and simplify user inputs. Then they worked with instructors to distill choreography and music into short, stimulating modules to guide and inspire movement. From seated warm-up and balance building, to walking stimulation and restart techniques in case users got stuck. SS+K shot original footage, recorded new music, and then tested with class participants. Finally, Moving Through Glass was presented to leading researchers at the Weill Cornell Medical Center. They requested their own glass for testing and called the application amazing, ingenious, and incredibly promising. Okay, glass, balance me.
Shifting one side to the other.
Now, students like me have the tools to navigate the world outside the studio, whenever, wherever we need them.
That's all we got.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have time for questions? Does anyone have a question? Yes.
Well, it seems like the hardware is kind of like not exactly right for the software that you end up making. Is there any thought of making it on something different?
Well, we would really like to be part of, we looked at all the sort of virtual platforms. That was the best at the time. We'd like to be part of Glass 2 when it comes out. We've been talking to Google, but at this point we're not sure. You know, there are videos, the portability aspect is really key, right? So
at the time, Glass seemed like the perfect platform, but through the process of using it, of course, we found all these issues and limitations. But yeah, we're hoping that whatever they develop next in replacement for that, which they say they're doing.
not to knock Google, but because the device is amazing, it's a first generation device, and there are lots of issues to be worked out.
And, yeah, proof of concept, I think, was successful with it. But yeah, we'd like to see the next one be able to play more video, for example, because so we don't have to transition from video to audio all the time. To
Yeah.
let the battery cool down and so on. So
Yep.
yeah, there were lots of limitations, but there's yet to be a replacement, better platform that we've seen.
Have you thought about doing this for any other diseases?
Good question. I've been asked that before.
Oh, I have not. Go ahead, answer
Okay.
it.
Yes, the answer is yes. However, we are an agency which does commercial work mostly. So I think it's a partially a question of funding. So who's going to pay for it? We do work for free on some things like this, that we enjoy, but are we going to do that for all the diseases that this could be useful for? Probably not. So it might be useful as something that other people will take up and riff off of. So the answer is sort of like, yeah, it would be a great idea, but we haven't really given it much.
Yep. For this, we were obviously totally reliant on this established Dance for PD program, which is this wealth of curriculum. So, and and they had medical advice, and we had medical advisors. I don't think we'd take on something on our own.
Yeah,
without
it's a
partner.
huge process.
Yeah, yeah. Yes.
Hi, are you considering, I know, yes, music for physical rehabilitation, that kind, or even just, at home practice for, let's say, yoga practice?
Oh, sure. Sure. And, yeah.
That is, glass generally has been promoted as being useful for sort of augmented reality in the workplace and for physical therapy and that kind of stuff. I think it's mostly not lived up to that expectation just because of the limitations that have been existing so far.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that I'm not sure that's specific to our particular app that we've made. But that's specific, I think, the glass platform generally being useful for training different kinds of activities.
And most of the medical applications we've seen that have survived have been with physicians to retrieve records, basically as information retrieval that's geospecific within hospital settings.
Surgeries, remote surgeries.
Yeah, and we did a lot more ideation on how to build this program out. Like, one of the things that people with Parkinson's also need to do sometimes is if you have a familiar pathway in your life, like getting through a particular door or something we would not think of, or getting around a corner, you can have difficulty doing that, and an instructor can work with you, and you can sort of train yourself to make through this. And so we'd love to have a network where you could upload your scenario, someone could work with it as a third party and send it back to you, some suggestions for how to go through that. So lots of possibilities, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.